Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Wonderful to be here. Wonderful to talk to you wonderful people. See some old faces and lots of new faces. A comment on something that John said, that the second dynamic should be about finding the right person rather than just having the urge to procreate. At my age, John, the urge is fun.
Great.
It's to be desired, you know. And I want to make a commendation to Tatiana and our Russian friends. Здравствуйте. Как вы поживаете? And Tatiana's excellent running translation, which we talked about how nice it would be last night if we could find somebody who would do a running translation. And here we have it. It sounds very professional and very appropriate. It's not obtrusive and nobody's being slowed down. I hope it's as good for you guys as it is for us. And a round of applause for Tatiana. I know it was very good. So this is about parascientology. I was never very much, when I was young, I was not into the humanities. I was not into the finer sensibilities. I was a craftsperson as much as my parents allowed me to be, and I was very physical. It never occurred to me that I was anything but a body. And that made me fit in very well with the people that I grew up with. And I had a strange experience one day, and I'm going to recreate it here with you. I was already out of college. I was in New York City. I was an instrument maker and repairman, had a little shop on the Lower East Side. And I was sitting there late at night with a girlfriend, and we were both bored. And it occurred to me, let's do some card tricks. I don't play cards, and I can't even shuffle without embarrassing myself. But
slow down. Slow down a little.
Slow down. Oh, okay. It's too fast for you. I've got so much.
It's too much for comedy for me.
Huh?
She has time to translate.
Oh, am I going too fast?
It's okay, as long as you don't use big words.
Say that again.
It's okay. Keep going. That's fine.
Okay. You tell me if you hold up your hand, you know, she can change the words. If she looks stunned or angry, I'll slow down and say something. Anyhow, I was sitting there in my Lower East Side pad with a girlfriend and thinking, let's do some card tricks, mental telepathy stuff. I had a deck of cards in the back in a closet, and I walked over to the closet. It was in a hallway. It was dark, and I picked I'll tell you what, let me do the trick first. I could actually do the little demo, and then I'll tell you how the thing went for us, okay? I have a deck of cards here, a regular deck of cards. It's pre-shuffled, so they don't go all over the place, I have to go pick them up. And but I will cut the deck, and I'm going to look at a card. Okay. And I'm looking at this card. Now, it's my reality that if I look at the card, especially with the intention to share it, everybody, not just somebody, everybody got this card on some level. Everybody. Anybody ever in a session and the auditor was trying to pull a withhold, and you can't find it, you don't know what the hell he's talking about, and you wish he would stop, and he's very persistent, what's that, right there? Okay, what he's looking for is not a happening, he's looking for a picture. Okay, he's looking for a picture of a happening. Okay? If it wasn't activated, it wouldn't read. But there it is, you're looking for this, you don't know what the hell it is, and you wish you would stop. Okay, you're objecting and so forth. And finally, he finds it, and you realize that you were sitting on it all along. You just couldn't contact it. File not found, right? On the computer. So for everybody got this. Okay? Who thinks they know what it is? Yes?
Cross 7.
Hmm?
Cross 7.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you.
Six of spades is what I got.
Okay.
4 of diamonds.
4 of spades.
Queen of hearts.
Huh?
A heart. Queen of hearts.
What about hearts?
Queen of hearts. Three.
Huh?
Three.
Guess again.
Is it close?
I said guess again.
That sounds like close.
Ace of hearts.
Who said 2?
Well, I thought it was three because that thing in the middle.
Yeah. You were seeing the thing in the middle. Yeah.
I had that idea from the moment you said, what is it? And I just wasn't going to say it.
Thank you. Yeah, we invalidate it, we push it out of our minds. Because, you see, this is an interesting, quote, trick. Okay? But what fascinated me, when it first happened to me, is the implications. The implication. What are the implications of this? First of all, what can you do with it? I think the first thing that hit me is, I went to college 4.5 years, University of Michigan, for psychology courses. Nobody ever showed me this. Nobody ever even showed it to me in a controversial sense. It didn't exist. Nothing. It's like airfoils in the 1500s. Airfoils worked in the 1500s. In fact, they used sails. They used sails. They used sails to turn windmills. But nobody ever got the idea of putting the sail horizontal and jumping with it. Actually, a couple of people did. That's another story. But if you had demonstrated that, they would have burned you as a witch. In fact, the first person to demonstrate that was in Istanbul, and he was arrested and exiled. Okay, in the 1600s. His name was Ahmed Chalabi. But anyhow, so what happened with us was I went into the closet and I pulled out the deck of cards. And I took it down, looked at the card, the face card, and it looked to me like Ace of Hearts. And I got out into the light, and I saw this 4 of Hearts, and I said, "Tammy, what card am I looking at?" And she said, "Ace of Hearts." And my heart stopped. I said, "Guess again." She said, 4 of Hearts. And in that moment, I moved into another dimension. Because this was not about me doing it. I realized if I can do it, especially with her, anybody can do it. Why aren't we doing this? What are the implications? What about people who live their lives in secrecy? You know, people who cheat on their wives, people who embezzle from their bosses. What dimension are they living in? What is the meaning of this? This is just incredible. And the other thing is, what the hell can I do with it? Well, at that time, I didn't know. I had no idea. You could have a nightclub act, or you could cheat on the horses or something, or you go to a casino or something. You know, what constructive could you do? Of course, now we use this all the time, don't we? But at that time, I didn't know anything about auditing sessions and mental pictures and all of this stuff. I was finding out fast and fast. In fact, I wanted to learn how to do it. And I went to the biggest metaphysical bookstore in New York, and maybe in the world at that time, was Weiser's bookstore on 14th Street. And I looked around. I wanted a how-to book. And there was no how-to book. There were books about maybe it could be, or is it valid or not valid. I forget the names of some of them were very, very valid, very prominent. But there was no, what I was looking for was like a guy who goes to a music store looking for a chord book to play guitar. You know, he's not looking for a dissertation on whether it's possible to play guitar. You know, he just wants a chord book. I couldn't find one. Closest I found was a metaphysical book, very Christian, about how you could do this, but you have to attribute all of it to Jesus. And I was not sophisticated enough to utilize that at that time. Probably, had I had the right attitude about it, I could have used something out of it. But at that time, I just, you know, that. And a few weeks went by, and somebody dragged me after many weeks of trying to get me to go up to one of these self-help things uptown. And it just, you know, I resisted this, but I saw the guy. I saw a subtle change in the guy. That impressed me because this guy was a schmuck. And suddenly, I always had to throw him out of my apartment at night. He never knew when it was time to go. One day, he'd come over and play classic guitar and recite his poetry to me, which was fun, and then I had to throw him out. And one night he stood up and he said, "Hey, well, I think it's time for me to leave. I guess you must want to go to bed, and I'll see you later." And I forget what his name was. And I said, wait a minute. What have you been doing? Something changed. Something changed. And he says, well, it's that stuff I've been telling you about. You know, this guy, Gene Hobel, he's so wonderful. He's up on West End Avenue. And so he shut me up to Gene Hobel, and I saw this guy who was very funny. And I'll tell you, had it been somebody else other than Gene, maybe I would not have come back again. But Gene was a good speaker. He had this Robin Williams energy. He was very funny, very talented, extremely spontaneous. And I enjoyed it, and I commented on this to him. He said, well, it's all a result of Hubbard's work. I was sold. Now, in retrospect, I know it wasn't. He was a monster. But it got me in there. I must have had a hidden standard, and he fulfilled that standard, and I was willing to go and do this stuff and go up the bridge and all of this stuff. And during this time, I would talk about what initially got me interested, to people who would come over. David Mayo, would come over, and I asked him about this. I said, don't touch that. Don't go there. That'll re-stimulate the bank. I was kind of, God, here's this guy with thick glasses, and he's telling me don't do this thing that I can already do. But it all made so much sense to me that I stuck with it. And I stuck with it. I started until I didn't stick with it anymore. But I kind of went my own way, but my own way was not off in another direction. I just started thinking a lot for myself. Meanwhile, I had a lot of interesting experiences, like making people turn around while I was sitting there with a friend of mine, Johnny Papaleo, in my storefront on 9th Street, and making people turn around, especially girls. You could do this from across the street. He could do it. And things like one day I was taking Dianetics, and they give you this command, what impact or incident could cause a whatever, right? I saw this, I was on a subway car, all by myself, with a bag lady down at the other end. Terrible tip. This. And I just sat there running in my mind what impact or injury could cause this thing, this feeling. And I just kept running different pictures until I got one that went poof, and she stopped twitching. And she turned around to look, and she saw me. And she was angry. And I realized two things. One, I can do this, and if I can do it, anybody can do it. And the other, I did not do a favor. I had not done her a favor. This was a perpetration. I had taken something away from her that was important to her without her permission. So that was interesting. Other little things like learning about perfect duplicates. You know what anybody not know what a perfect duplicate is and how it works and how it makes things disappear? Okay, well the idea is if you see something, if you can create a perfect duplicate of it and move them together, the thing that you first saw will disappear or fade or get thin. And that's basically how we deal with negative mental energy and mental pictures in Dianetics and all kinds of processes. Okay, so I sat there in front of a mirror one night, and I saw this image of this face, and I mocked up another image of the same face a few inches away, and then I made a little exercise of bringing them together so they coincided. And suddenly I was looking in a mirror with no reflection. That was a little spooky. That was interesting. So we did a lot of things like that. I had a roommate, his name was Bob James, he was a musician, and he came home from from class one day where he had been learning dating with a mirror, and he started dating people's birthdays and stuff just by running the commands without the meter. That was very impressive. And of course, I realized if he could do this, I could do this, or anybody could do it. So that there was a little epiphany there. In St. Hill, when I went to St. Hill, I had a friend that I'd pal around with, and one day we got the idea of taking the alligator clips on the meter and hooking it up to different plants. And we finally settled on this great big tree, probably hundreds of years old. And it gets very high TA because it's not really built for that. You're going through the cork candy and there's a lot of resistance. So the tree had a great deal of real high TA tree. But it was responding. And we got the idea, I don't know who got the idea, what happens if we burn a leaf? So I smoked at that time, I took out a match, and I lit the match, and I held it under one of the leaves. This is a big tree. The tree certainly wasn't going to mind this, losing a leaf, or part of a leaf, and it got a fall. Wow, there's somebody in there. Let's try it again. Took out another match. And I went to light the match. And I got another fall before I lit the match. And I learned more in that moment about communication than from any kind of drill I ever did. It's the intention. And if you're asking an auditing question, and you're reading the auditing question, and you're thinking, it's getting kind of late, and I'd like to go to lunch, you're probably going to get an answer about food from the guy to your question. Okay, so I got involved with Lloyd and Tia Greenberg. Actually, I knew them from the first I ever got into Scientology. They're a remarkable couple of people, and I could talk a lot about them. Lloyd, I used to go sailing with Lloyd, and he recommended that I read the Ceph materials that got me not really interested in channeling, but I was interested in the material in it. Some of it struck true, and we hadn't really covered up some of the stuff in Scientology. And at a certain point, I moved to Pacific Northwest, and Lloyd died. We lost him. And I came down to visit Tia and to console an old friend. And when I got to the house and parked, there were a lot of cars there. She ran out. Oh, it's Hank, and come on in, and Lloyd's about to start talking. He's going to give a lecture. Oh, wait a minute. What is this? I came to console an old friend, and she's way off the deep end, and she's got a lot of company here. And I couldn't figure out how to get out of it without being offensive, so I came in there with a video camera, so the videotape it. I could hide behind the video camera. You know how that works. And I watched this thing, and I watched this woman, Peggy, who was a channel. And Peggy didn't know much about Scientology, and she didn't know a lot of the people in the room. But the stuff that was coming out of her mouth, only Lloyd could have been saying. And Lloyd had a peculiar sense of humor, like Woody Allen a little bit. And he knew all the tech. He was a brilliant person. I loved him. And Peggy, it was coming out of Peggy's mouth. And I already interviewed her before the start of it. And I was convinced she could not have been originating from her. So I was forced to look at this. And about that time, also, I got interested in prospecting for gold and silver in order to pay for my level. There's no other way I thought I could pay for them. And so, anybody else know that feeling? I got to find a gold mine to get up to the next level. So I was going out. I was learning to fly. I had my own airplane, and certain places on the Mojave Desert caught my attention. It just fascinated me, certain geological forms. I probably had some earlier experience with this, another lifetime or something. But I was fascinated. I look on the charts, on the maps, and they were all old gold mines. I got the idea, maybe I got some kind of a gift here, a perception. And I found a friend who was working for me building Appalachian dulcimers in my garage, Eric Swanson, who was on the briefing course. And we got together. It turns out that he loved desert and caves and prospecting and all of this stuff. He'd grown up in the desert. And we went out, we started doing this stuff together. We would buy maps. And I would look at the maps and he'd look at the meter. We did this with the meter. And we'd always find stuff. And then we'd go out, either go up in the airplane and find, and circle around and pinpoint stuff. We really got stuff pinpointed, we'd go out with a motorcycle. And we found a lot, it was encouraging us. We actually built our own assay laboratory on Alvarado Street because it was costing us so much money to get these samples melted down and taken care of. Tatiana, have I lost you?
It's okay, I'm not going by word, but I just give you the general idea.
I started prospecting for gold and silver with a friend using a meter with maps. We call this popularly map dowsing. Okay, and there are many ways of dowsing it. I've used pendulums with gold pendulums and stuff like that. The most elegant way of doing this is with a meter. Okay, and we did find stuff, and it was quite encouraging. And we had some interesting experiences. Every time we went out, we'd either find very enriched material. Of course, the real estate there was so expensive that the idea of going and buying it from somebody, they're about to put up a shopping center, you're not going to go in there and lay claim for a little gold mine. But sometimes we'd go out, we had no idea why we were here. We'd climb up to the top of a hill, and there would be what we call a prospect. There would be a shaft dug in the side of the hill going back 15 feet. Somebody had decided at some point within the last 200 years that it was worth digging a hole into the rock 15 feet deep. Maybe they got some gold, maybe they didn't find enough, it wasn't worth it for them at that time, because gold was only $35 an ounce, which is ridiculous. But we had those experiences. One day I went into one of those prospects and I came out, and boy, I had somebody there with me, and I wasn't able to get rid of it. And it was an interesting experience. It caught my attention. This is rare that sort of a thing happened, but I figured it was just some old miner just I don't know, died there in frustration on top of his donkey or something. And first person he had that showed up, that showed an interest in what he had an interest in, he glommed onto him, and that was one experience with the processing. By the way, a sequel to that is I was at St. Hill, and I was at AO in Florida, and somehow somebody found out that I had been doing this, and they called me into the ethics office. And they made me sign a statement. This was out tech, and I should stop doing it. I promised to stop doing this. Okay. And then a few years after that, I was sitting at Tia's with Hannah, I forget what her name is now, it's Eltingham. Yeah, well, Whitfield, and I told her about this, and she said, "What do you think Hubbard was doing in Journey into Time?"
Yeah, that's right.
He's doing the same thing.
Mission into time.
It was Mission into Time. Yeah, so only he was allowed to do that. So anyhow, yeah, maybe he would have liked it. I mean, he's not the one who personally told me to stop, but that was the effect of it. Around this time, I got interested in some other literature that was channeled. I was looking for a book for Leah, and I was walking around Alexandria bookstore in Pasadena, and this book jumped off the shelf at me. It was called Messages from Michael. And I read it. This happens to me a lot. I looked at it, and I start in the middle, and I just read here, read there. It looked interesting. I thought, Tia's going to like this. And so I bought one for myself, too. And I gave it to Tia, and she really didn't like it. She didn't approve, because it talked about soul ages, and her idea of soul is ageless, and how can you have soul ages if the soul is ageless? There's something about it that she really didn't like. And for me, it was answering some questions, so I read it, and I got kind of interested in it. Not that the idea that it was channeled, but it had integrity. It had a lot of integrity and answered questions that I'd never been able to answer. And I'd recommend that reading to some people who I thought might be ready for it or wouldn't be messed up by it. And one day I met somebody who was a professional Michael Channel, and I became very involved with that person. And she was a brilliant channel, very articulate, very specific. She could take passages that were actually coming in, and it's like she was translating them meticulously. And I would work with her, and we could work together on the meter to verify that she had gotten it right. Some of the stuff was very literary. She had grown up a rodeo queen, behaved like a barroom floozy, and spoke like a college professor, English professor. Just very interesting combinations. From one personality to the other. Ray has met her, and she could be extremely difficult. But one of the things that we did was we co-sponsored a workshop on automatic writing. I became interested in automatic writing. She's doing it all the time. I mean, everything she wrote was automatic writing. I mean, you look at her letter she was writing, and it started out one handwriting, and it go into another handwriting. Somebody else was writing that letter. The slant was different, the O's were different, everything was different. And it was obvious even to her what it was. I mean, she was not in resistance to the idea that other stuff was coming through her. She was out of balance. By the way, in this workshop, everyone in the workshop was to sit and just try to empty their minds and let something come through. And I could talk about this workshop quite a bit. Some fascinating things happened in it. And I ended up writing a couple of short stories in that workshop, a couple of which appeared in the Free Spirit Journal. One was The Lion and the Lamb. I don't know if you remember that. You do? Yeah. And that was, I didn't channel, but I didn't feel like I was writing it. I was totally by the note. I would get writer's block. I was one of these college kids who would sit down to write an essay and nothing would come out. In fact, I wrote a story about that. Her assignment was to write something from her own viewpoint, which was very, very hard for her to do. I understand Peter Sellers had a similar issue with that. Anyhow, one of the things that we worked on over the phone and on the computer, I would just kind of I would turn the computer screen down so I couldn't see what was on it. I just let my fingers go. And I turn up the light on the screen to see what I'd written. And one thing that I'd written was purpose, the empowerment of people according to the receptiveness. I don't know what the hell that meant. I mean, I didn't know what that meant. And she thought, oh, that's impressive. Okay, I put it in a notebook. 2 years later, I looked at that. I looked at that page in the notebook, and I realized that's my personal purpose. That's my admin scale. Anything that I'm doing, and I do a lot of stuff, a lot of weird stuff. Like airplanes, sailboats, Turkish classical music, I build instruments, all kinds of stuff. But anything that's not on that purpose is a hobby. It's something left over for another lifetime, and it's for enjoyment, it's perfectly all right. But if I have to choose between things, the thing that's closest to that is mine. And when I stay close to that, I'm supported. It's fascinating. Just had no idea what I was doing at that computer with the screen off and typing. Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you. A couple of years afterwards, I worked a lot with this stuff, and I learned, one of the things I learned from working with this perspective, the Michael writings, was the idea of oversouls. You know, in my training, maybe it exists somewhere else, but in my training, I was never given tools to address a being of comparable magnitude to myself. All the beings I ever addressed were kind of semi-sentient, degraded, you know, guys that were stuck there, they shouldn't be there, and all this type of a thing. But I would come across beings of comparable magnitude to myself, and I kind of had to invent my own way of dealing with it. And then I discovered, through some of this writing, there are beings that are not of comparable magnitude. And some people in philosophy and you know, arcane sciences, they call them ascended beings. Has anybody ever heard the idea of the concept of an ascended being?
Or master.
Yeah, master, ascended. Someone who's kind of beyond the compulsion to reincarnate, but they're there. They make themselves available either routinely or on occasion. And some of them actually combine their consciousnesses, and they'll create a persona so that they can talk to people, because people cannot conceive of them as this kind of a consciousness. Now, Ron talked about this in his writings, but I never saw anything about this on the bridge. He certainly understood the concept of a body of theta, but you know, to find out how to deal with it, I had to look at the Michael stuff, and then there were other, you know, beings like this group beings, and usually there are ways to qualify. If you're talking to somebody, how do you know they're not kind of weird? You know, how do you know that they're inappropriate? Yes?
Are you going to demonstrate anything? Because they're asking if there was a demonstration.
Well, we're going to demonstrate the meters afterward, but we were going to go a little longer on that, and I was going to introduce Norma and talk about some of the stuff that we've worked on, you know, together with this, and then go over conclusions and wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't want you to run out of time with Norma.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, okay. Well, that's my next. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about two things you said that I thought were right on. You talked about channeling Lloyd. I was working with Lawrence West, my Class 8 auditor. One evening, Tia Greenberg came over, and I'd heard about people channeling Lloyd. And the woman who channels him wasn't around. Well, somebody, to speak of Ouija boards in here, somebody brought out a Ouija board, and they thought they had a channel to Lloyd. You mentioned he had a weird sense of humor. The way everybody confirmed it was Lloyd, and this is what I think we should all be open for our knowingness, was Tia said to Lloyd, two other people were on that board, and she said to Lloyd, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, do you love the boat more than me?" And he said, "Absolutely."
I was there.
Oh, you were that? Okay.
Yeah, I was there.
You remember that?
Yeah, he could be facetious too.
And to me, that's the statement, beyond the recognition of when you know you've got it.
Yeah, that nailed it for you.
And that nailed it for me. I didn't believe in channeling until that moment I went,
Thank you. Let me keep going. We can talk about it later. But thank you. I got what you're saying. So I moved from one place to another until finally I met a lady whom I fell in love with, and we lived together for a while and realized that we were probably better for each other than to be apart. I think what got us together originally was Middle Eastern music and sex. I don't know in which order, but I discovered that she was a graduate of Berkeley Psychic Institute, and we had a lot of realities in common. And we're still together here after 15 years. And her name is Norma Novi. We keep our own names. And she is coming up right now. This is... And I'm going to hand the mic to Norma and set her off to the side a little bit. And is going to tell you about her own perspective and how we've been able to work together and what she's learned and what I've learned and BPI and all kinds of stuff.
Okay, I'm going to speed through some of that. As a psychic, we learn to evaluate for people. And I had to unlearn a lot of that. Instead of saying, well, you've got brown energy and isn't that shitty? You say, wow, look at that mass. Just put your attention on the mass. It may be brown, or what color do you see? How does it make you feel? So, drawing people out and having them gain their own sense of reality about what is in this space that's around them, what is in their aura, what colors are their chakras. And of course, I don't ascribe meaning to color necessarily, because everything is particular to that person. So when Hank and I got together, he accused me of evaluating. And so it was just a process of unlearning some stuff and gaining more of a perspective of what Hank does. I am not a technical meter person, but I'm very visual, and when I close my eyes, I see reads. I mean, not on a meter, but I see where the hot spots are. And so I can direct people to them. So we, after we were married a certain number of years, and I can answer any questions you want on this later, but we, at some point, I went to a funeral, and even though I was not very good friends with these people, and I did not know their son that had unexpectedly died in a freak accident, I sat and was sobbing at this funeral. And when I came home, I didn't feel good. And that was sort of the start of our working together on beings that had a hard time crossing over. I would get the sense that there was this mass pressing down on the top of my head. And I would get quite bitchy and not myself. And to the point where I recognized, gee, Norma, you're not being yourself. You're not being neutral and supportive, etc. And then I would approach Hank and say, please, can we do a session? Something is wrong. And that's when we discovered that I was attracting dead people. And from that point on, we have processed many people that we've known in our circle of friends that, well, not many, but have died or have had tragic deaths, have committed suicide. And a couple of, I read the book, 20 Years Among the Dead, a huge impact on me. I thought, oh my God, I found my life purpose. And then
by a guy named Wicklund.
Dr. Wicklund.
Dr. Wicklund.
He and his channel wife processed many, many hundreds of dead people and helped them cross over around the early 1900s. Another thing is I watched The Ghost Whisperer and I thought, oh my God, if I could just do that. So one thing that is important is to keep one's neutrality. And I'm afraid I lost some of my neutrality. And I had to gain it back. I had to decide, gee, I don't want to open myself up to everyone. But why don't you describe how we work?
Well, a couple of people on here, some of them you might recognize. Anybody here know Frank Samuelson? No? Okay. He ran a center for, well, you knew Frank, of course, Raymond. He ran a convocation in Berkeley or Oakland of independent Scientologists, and it's going on as a social thing for a number of years. after he separated from his wife, he took his own life, which I thought was so needless. I was so sad that that happened because I liked him. But, well, without getting into a bunch of individuals, we have a list of individuals, and we could have, you know, some interesting stories about each of them. But is there any particular part of that that you wanted to talk about? Want to take one of them, Tanya?
No, I just would like to talk about how you use your
how we do this.
you use your technology
Okay.
to support what I see and feel and bring out and to help people.
Yeah. Well, you know, the master auditing question. What's going on? Yeah, that. Yeah. And, you know, working with Norma is different from working with a lot of people, because a lot of people, you would ask them that, you know, what's that? And I don't know. You know, and you have to go through 20 minutes, I don't know, I don't see nothing. And Norma will generally tell you what she sees. There's a being in my space. The thing is it, where is it in relation to your body? It's right up there. Say hello. Who is it? She generally recognizes. Often, if it's somebody that we knew together, or she knew, she knows who it is. It's not a lot of searching. And good. First thing we look for is undelivered communication. And there's almost always undelivered communication. And they say what it's like.
And let me interject. When they say what it's like, or when I interpret what the person is saying, what it's like, there will be an accompanying read on the meter. So he checks it. It doesn't. I just don't go off and ramble on and on and on. It's a process where he will check what I'm seeing.
Exactly so, and they're answering questions. They're answering. I ask a question, and I look for a read, and I get an answer. If the answer fits the question, that's great. If it resolves something, there's a blowdown. You go on to the next question. You know, there's a somewhat similar technique that I've used sometimes when a person is in a relationship with someone that they can't confront or can't talk to, maybe a parent who's nuts, and could be quite alive, but they dare not approach this person and talk to them. So we use a little thing that Tia taught us. I mean, I'm sure many people do it. Well, she called it voice dialogue because it came from a little pamphlet where you just put a chair over there, and we used to do this with teddy bears, didn't we? And you picture your mother-in-law sitting in the chair, and you say hello to her, and you try to get her to say hello back and hello, and ask the mother-in-law if there's anything that she has to say, and whatever she has to say gets acknowledged by you and your client. And then, is there any more of that? And you can see on the meter if there's more of it or if there's not. You know, if they say something, there's a little blowdown, and that's it. There's no more. And then you ask the client, is there anything you want to say to your mother-in-law that you haven't said? You might ask, why haven't you said that? But it's not necessary. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. And you go back and forth until everything's been said. Sometimes that's all that's necessary. Because some of, you know, going back to the people who have passed on, many of them don't have any concept of what the hell has just happened to them. They have this experience of talking. They're talking to you. Ken, I'm talking to you. Why don't you respond? Why don't you, I know you hear me, why don't, and Ken is thinking, I'm just going crazy. You know, and to go to another person, you know, Mary, you know, this one, that one, the Norma, and Norma, boy, I can make an impression on Norma. Friends for life, it's like feeding a stray cat. You see? So and you just follow that to a beneficial conclusion. Is that understood? Okay. Do you want to say something?
We often find that the person has unfinished business, that wants to give a message to someone, does not acknowledge that they're dead, has to be convinced, and we will call on people from the other side that they know that have already crossed over to talk with them and say, you know, to help them. And we call on guides, on spirits, on angels, whatever works at that moment. But it's always corroborated by the meter. It also is corroborated by me yawning. I'm a big yawner. I'm a crier. And at the end, when the spirit leaves, it's quite dramatic. When it leaves my space, it's yawn after yawn after yawn.
And like 2 division blowdowns and stuff like that. And it's also corroborated, like in Tanya's case, with her husband.
Oh, yeah.
A very close friend died very recently, and we saw her as she was dying. And came to Norma, and Norma, the whole thing with Norma, and unfinished business with her husband, and what happened was supposed to happen to the house, and and we recorded everything. We wrote everything down. We recorded it on the virtual meter, and we talked to him about it. And he had had some of the same experiences. Actually, several days after, we hadn't talked to him about anything specific. He had taken a walk in the woods, very distraught, and saw her there and came to a resolution based on the consciousness that we had observed. And she had changed. Yeah, she had changed on the other side. This is a woman that had lived a good life. And she was finished. And she chose this over coming back and being semi-paralyzed. And I had not wanted that. I was trying to get her to come back. And she's adamant about it, and she had accomplished all of these wonderful things. And it was interesting. It was quite interesting. And talking to him about it, he had this conversation with her after she had gotten to that point. She was not at that point when we first contacted her, when she contacted us. But it was very fast. It was like, one session, 1 hour? You know, she got all of this stuff sorted out. So I want to. There are a couple of, can I call them axioms or precepts that I use when I'm doing this kind of work. And one is that the difference between someone with a body and someone without a body is highly overrated. And if you remember that, you keep your perspective. And the other thing is that anyone in this universe or any other universe can speak to anyone else if they want to. The communication lines often are pretended to be closed. It's blocked. They've got a force shield. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to this. It's not accessible. There's energy there, I can't get through it, but you can get through it. Anybody can talk to anybody else. You might not enjoy the experience, but you can do it. And the other one is that we are all beings, we're not bodies. And we see a lot of people who pay lip service to that, but they don't have a subjective understanding of it. You know, most people, even if they've studied past lives and they've run past lives even, they cannot conceive of being, say, for instance, between lifetimes. So what do you do between lifetimes? You know, you go right to another body. Everybody, it's different for different people. People have very different experiences. So, some conclusions about that. One is, well, this is interesting. You know, from having all of these experiences, I thought I was no longer afraid of death. And I'm not for myself. But I am afraid of death. And what brought that home to me was losing a cat a year ago. We were with this animal for 15 years. Her energy was like a soft music that was always playing. There's still some charging. In the background. And when we lost her, and she was ready to go. She was too old, her body wasn't making it. But I figured I'd get over it quickly. And I did in a sense, but I can go back into that space and it can be upsetting to me. And I can go back into that space and bring her back too, which I'm not trying to do. You know, so that's a whole nother realm, a whole nother dimension there. After she died, I mean, for 2 weeks I didn't want Norma out of my sight, you know. So I am respectful of death, and I'm highly respectful of people who lose a loved one. I mean, this was just a cat, right? And I haven't quite figured out for myself how to totally reconcile this to where it's a non-issue. And a couple of other things. You know, I sell meters, and thank you. That was 45 minutes. So I left myself a little bit of time here.
Yeah, if I didn't want you to lose the audience, because some people want to go.
Okay. Who wants to go? Who's bored? Okay.
Bored, I just need to eat. Different thing.
Yeah, hungry, yeah. Okay. Just a couple of comments to wrap up this thing, and then I'll tell you about the demonstration. People tell me that they want to buy a meter, they want to buy solo can, they want to buy, you know, my solo, solo clearing manual. And I wrote that before I wrote the other stuff. And I try to encourage them to work with other people. I tell people the hardest person you're ever going to have to work with is yourself. And the second hardest is going to be your old lady or your main squeeze. You can do it, but it's not that easy, and the risks are great. You know, and I try to encourage them to work with other people. And I try to tell them that, you know, when you're solo auditing, you're seldom working with yourself. You know, the only trouble that we have in this universe is with other people. You know, and that's what you're going to be working on in some way or another. And if you understand that, you should be open when you're learning to working with somebody, you know, in a practice sense, in a classroom situation. Something else that I have a lot of attention on is that there is no way to create an empathic civilization without us understanding these fundamental facts. You know, there's this concept of empathy versus entropy, where everything's falling apart. Empathy, somebody gave a wonderful definition of that earlier. You know, where you see and feel. That was John. Yes. And this is absolutely essential, and it's crucial to us not destroying ourselves within the next few years. There's a book called The Empathic Civilization by Jeremy Rifkin. I highly recommend it. Very insightful. And there's a need to understand who you are, that you're not a body, not just to know about it, but to really subjectively experience this. I even see Hindus who believe deeply in reincarnation, but they don't understand that they're not a body. They don't behave as though they are eternal beings. They behave like crap. And it doesn't work. And how do you educate them? How do you show them this? And how do you get them to take responsibility? There's another book I'd like you to read. It's called The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. And that's pretty much what I have for the parascientology. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Ray, for the opportunity to share with